This week, I wanted to go outside of my comfort zone and do some arts and crafts. Specifically, I wanted to make a scrying mirror. Now, this completely follows on from my last video, which was all about mugwort, its use in history and in modern witchcraft, where I found a lot of people using mugwort in relation to scrying. Now, scrying is one of those practices that I don't think gets spoken about enough, and I will be doing an entire video on this subject if you want to learn how to do it for yourself. But a lot of people will use what's known as scrying mirrors. These are also called black mirrors and witches mirrors, and they're a really useful tool for this practice, but they aren't always accessible. I do, in my collection, already have an obsidian scrying mirror. I'm going to have to be really careful with it because it is super delicate, but this is my obsidian scrying mirror. You can see it's really, really reflective. At least I hope you can see that it's really reflective because it's very, very finely polished. But this kind of magical tool isn't always something everyone has access to. You might live in an area where you can't find one, where they're very expensive. They can vary from £30 all the way up to several hundreds of pounds, depending on where you buy them from and how large they are. And so I wanted to try and make my own from really affordable materials. Now, a scrying mirror doesn't have to be made of obsidian, that's just one option. So I figured I used to love arts and crafts when I was a kid. What's stopping me from doing it as an adult? Society has put so much pressure on people to monetize their hobbies, and I suppose by making a video out of it, I am, but mostly what I wanted to do this for was just to see if I could, and to be able to make a magical tool that is really cost effective in comparison to buying what might be a really expensive obsidian alternative. So I set about attempting to find a picture frame. This might seem like a really bizarre choice if you don't know where I'm going with this, but you can make yourself a black mirror out of a glass and wood picture frame. You can make it as large as you want. You can get ginormous picture frames if you wanted, or you can make it really, really small. As long as you're able to look into it, you're able to use it for scrying purposes. For this, you're going to need some black paint. I have used black acrylic paint that I already had in my collection, and then you can decorate the frame as much as you want or as little as you want. It's entirely up to you. I'm also utilising some mugwort in this as well for some extra potency. For me, this project, with the items I already had, only cost me £5. That was the cost of the picture frame. If you need to buy paint as well and maybe a little bit of mugwort, then that might cost you a little bit more. But when you're looking at an obsidian mirror costing usually upwards of £25–30 into the several hundreds of pounds, it could be a good place to start if you want to try it out and see if it works for you. With that being said, let's start making it. So we're going to be starting off with a very simple process. This is the picture frame that we're going to be using. It is a 7x5" frame from Dunelm. So the first thing we need to be doing is separating out the glass from the frame because we're going to be working with them separately. And to do this, we're going to be using just a simple pair of pliers. Nothing super fancy. These ones are really old. I'm pretty certain that they're actually my dad's. I should probably give them back to him at some point. But we're going to be separating out the glass from the frame. But while I'm doing that, I'm actually going to be creating an infusion of mugwort. This is some hot water. It's not boiling. It's almost kind of tepid. I could easily touch this. And we're just going to be putting in some dried mugwort so that we can make an infusion that we're going to use to wash down the glass of this mirror. I have a little lapel mic that I literally just bought, so I've got a lapel mic now. I'm so proud of myself. I've been putting off doing this for ages, and now I get to walk around and I don't have to worry about my phone's microphone anymore. It's amazing. Okay, I'm gonna go get my mugwort. Where did I put it? Nettle, oak, catnip, lavender, hops, lemon balm, marigold, orange, peppermint, yarrow, dandelion root. Whatever that is in a jar that I definitely should have labelled and I have immediately forgotten what it is. Salt, oak bark, powder this, powder that, powder the other. That is an unidentified object. What is that? Ground ivy, nettle, hibiscus, dandelion leaf. Where have I put my mugwort? Oh no. I literally just had it in last week's video. So I have a ginormous tub of mugwort, and we're just going to be taking a little bit of this to infuse into this hot water. This is essentially just going to be allowed to steep for a while, a little bit like how you would steep tea. Now, mugwort is very, very good at repelling water. It doesn't really like to get soaked in there, so I'm just going to give it a good stir. And in the meantime, we are going to open this. Now these have the classic backs on them that just absolutely destroy your fingers, so pliers are incredibly useful for this purpose. Just try not to stab yourself like I seem to always manage to do. So this is ultimately what's going to become our mirror. It doesn't need to be a very fancy, expensive kind of frame. It can be something really cheap. As long as it's glass and it's reflective, you can work with it. Though obviously, please be careful if you are doing this with children or if you're just doing it yourself. This is glass, and so it can definitely cut you if you catch the sides wrong, and it can definitely cut you if you do break it, so please just make sure that you are being safe with it. So the plan for how we're going to do this, I do want to make it look pretty. I want it to look really nice, and so if you don't want to be highly decorative, you can just paint the mirror. So the mirror back is going to be painted black. This is essentially going to make it reflective, and by making it reflective, you are essentially creating a black mirror. So you could do the rest of the steps in this video, and you can still have a successful black mirror if you don't want to decorate the frame, but I do love a bit of witchy aesthetic. I know that not everyone likes it, but I really do. And so I wanted to make the frame really decorative as well. So this is what I'm hoping for. I will attempt to put it on the screen now. I will, however, say that my lines are a little bit wonky and I didn't realize until after I'd finished it, but it's a mock-up, it doesn't matter. So my plan is that the frame itself is going to be black. I did weigh up whether I wanted it to be gold, but having asked a few of my family members what they thought, the consensus was black frame, gold lettering. So that's what we're doing. So the frame itself is going to be black. The inside edge, there's like a lip on the inside, is going to be painted gold. And then I have created a little phrase that I want to work with that I have translated into Theban, which is going to be written all around the edge. Did I give myself a lot of work to do this in one day? Yes. Have I already started kind of late in the day, even knowing that I'm going to have to wait for paint to dry? Obviously, it's me. I like making my life 15 times more difficult than it needs to be. So let's do this. So I think I'm going to start by prepping the frame because I want this to steep just a little bit more. It's already changing color, the water is just a little, so I'm going to leave this to steep for a little bit longer, and we're going to start with the frame. So in order to make this work, we are doing some arts and crafts, and with that comes some trial and error. And I don't have a massive craft supply cabinet. I have a box, basically, of paint things, and not that much of it is new or easily accessible. So we're working with what we've got. So we have a variety of different paints that we're going to be going with. So I have some gold acrylic, which I'm hoping is going to be good for the fine details. I have some black acrylic, which I'm hoping to use on both the glass itself as well as the frame. It also has a wobbly bottom on it, so that's going to really annoy me, so I'm going to use that first. We're then going to cover the frame itself in this glossy Mod Podge just to kind of secure everything in. This is so old, I don't remember when I bought it, so I just have to hope that it's still fine. I have then struggled to find a brush that is decently sized. So I have 3 of these little tiny detail brushes, which I'm going to try and work with. I have found some watercolor brushes, which are bigger, so I'm going to try those. But the real one that we're going to be using for the glass is this foam, because I do think it's going to give some nice, big, even strokes, which is what you're after, because what you don't want is a patchy, streaky mirror, because that's going to get really, really distracting. And with all that, we're going to give it a go. Let's try. What's the worst that can happen? The worst that can happen is that it is a questionably finished mirror, but it will still work for purpose. And if I want to redo the frame, we can redo the frame. So I think first up, I want to do the gold interior, mostly because I feel like that is what is going to be covered over the fastest. If I do if I mess up with the black, it's going to cover up the gold, and it's going to be harder for me to put the gold over the black, so I'm thinking I'm going to do the gold first. Is that a smart choice? Only time will tell. And also, when you're doing this, if you need water, you can use your Mugwort water as a way of diluting paint, which is a really useful way of adding more kind of intention into it. My plan is, to paint along these edges. Probably gonna need a few coats to get it to look good. Okay, so while that is drying, I'm gonna take just a piece of kitchen roll and I'm just gonna wet it in this Mugwort solution. And this is gonna be used to wipe over the glass. Oh no. Now I can't pick it up again. So I'm then going in with the black paint. Now, if your black paint is better than mine, it's probably gonna cover better than this is, but we're gonna just persevere. It's gonna take a few layers, I think, to get it as black as I would like. And for divinatory purposes, I have dipped the brush in some mugwort water, which is why it is a little bit more diluted than it probably would be otherwise. But on the second and third coat, however many I'm gonna do, I don't think that's gonna be as much of a problem anymore because I'm not gonna use any additional water. So I'm gonna continue listening to my audiobook while I paint many layers of black on this. Oh, if you are wondering, this picture frame is actually made of wood, which is why I specifically chose the one from Dunelm. Of course, if you're not in the UK, you're not gonna be able to have access to that, but this one does specifically say that it is a solid wood photo frame, which is specifically what I was after because I knew I wanted to paint it. If you don't want to go through this process yourself, you can obviously just buy a already black picture frame or whatever color you fancy. I've obviously just gone for this because I wanted to add the additional details to it that would make it a little bit more magical and whimsical. So now the frame is done, we're going to be doing our first coat on the mirror. Now we need this to be really clean and crisp. Because of this, I'm hoping to use this little paddle thing because I suspect it's going to help me do it a little bit more easily, but we will just have to see. Generally speaking, we just need to make sure that this is dry. So I have already let it dry. I've then wiped it off and polished it so that when we put the paint on it, it's hopefully going to stick really well. Now, this is not going to be a one coat job. I suspect this is going to be at least 2 coats. My paint is quite old, so perhaps even 3, maybe 4. The one rule of thumb is make sure the first coat is really good because that is the coat that you are going to see from the front of the mirror. So we're only painting one side. And whatever coat you put down first is the one that you're gonna see. So we need to keep that coat really clean. I might even break out a slightly better quality acrylic paint because as much as I wanna use this up, I also wanna get this right because I only have one piece of glass. So we're gonna go break out the other paint and then we're going to streak this on and hopefully it isn't streaky, but I'm not sure how well this thing's gonna do. So the mirror is now completely black. This is the painted side. The mirrored side is very mirror-y. I'm not sure if you can see that. It just immediately turns into a mirror when you paint it, and that is just so cool. So my next job is actually to work back on the frame. Now, the frame took longer to dry than I was expecting. Yes, I did leave a bit unpainted because I needed to hold it. It took a little bit longer than it should have because my paints are really old. Like, I actually can't remember when I bought them, kind of old. So they took so long to dry, but we're going to be drawing on all of the symbols around the edge so that we can then paint them perfectly. Am I going to do this on camera? No. Probably because it's going to take me several hours of painstaking time. So instead, I'm going to make this quick and less painful for everyone watching, and I'm going to do it off camera, and then we're going to see what it looks like. So it goes from looking like this to looking like this. So this is what the frame looks like all finished. I have actually put a glossy coat of Mod Podge on it to make it super duper shiny. And now we get to move on to the next step, which is to put the glass into the mirror. Now, this is the bit that really makes it a scrying mirror. The frame itself was simply my own choice in decoration, and I took so long doing this. So I did post on Instagram that I was really struggling to get the acrylic paint to dry. It seemed like no matter what I was doing, I couldn't get it to go dry and set. And it's because my acrylic paint was so old. So we persevered and we've ended up with this, and I am so happy with it. So we're going to be setting this into the frame as you would expect any other picture frame. It's exactly the same process, except we're going to be adding some mugwort onto the back of it. So we're going to start by just putting the glass into the frame. We're going to be putting it so it is matte side up. So the shiny side is what you're going to be seeing. So we're then going to be taking some of the mugwort, which I have here, and we're going to be putting it between the back of the glass frame and the actual back piece of the frame. And this is something I've seen documented in many different people's practices, including that of Scott Cunningham. And so it's something that I wanted to include within my own scrying mirror. Now, mugwort tends to clump together a lot, which is why it's really commonly used in loose incenses, because it does kind of keep things together. But that does make it a little bit tricky to sprinkle and spread out, so we're just going to have to persevere with it and just try and get it as thin as possible, because we don't want it to put any strain on the glass or on the backing when we do put it on. So as long as we can kind of spread it out as much as possible, that should be fine. And then there we have our glass scrying mirror. You can actually see my other tripod that's on the wall for my other camera. But this is what the scrying mirror looks like. It is highly reflective, which makes it so useful for this purpose. I will, however, give it a little bit of a clean just before I do the final shots to really show you what it's going to look like. I have spent the last 4 days making this project, and it's mostly because I came across a few hiccups along the way. I didn't realise, having not done arts and crafts in a very long time, that paint can actually go bad. I had no idea that this was going to happen. So as I was painting the glass and the frame, I was realising that my paint wasn't actually drying. And I wasn't being impatient either. I wasn't checking after half an hour. I'm talking like 5, 6, 7 hours later, my paint was still completely wet, which is not what you want to be dealing with when you need to be doing multiple coats. So what went from being a 1 and 2 day project turned into a 3, 4, 5-day project. So if you're using new acrylic paint, you're probably not going to have the same problem I am, but do be warned, acrylic paint does go bad. So if you're not going to use ginormous containers of it, you don't need to buy ginormous containers of it. But this is the mirror in completion. You can see my light fitting. Look how reflective that is. This is just a really cheap Dunelm picture frame, £5. And it has become a highly effective scrying mirror. So around the edge, we have some words that I have translated into Theban. I will leave what the words say in the description box, mostly because off the top of my head, I have forgotten, and that's kind of the goal. When I translated the words into Theban, I wanted it to be something that as soon as I looked at it, I would not immediately recognize it. Similar to the way that you would create a sigil. You are creating something that separates it from the mundane, that makes it something that is more symbolic in nature than verbal, and so you are taking away the meaning in the words and replacing it with symbols. I wanted a similar thing to happen here, so I've ended up not knowing off the top of my head what it says. It was just a verse that I came up with that I really wanted to use, and it turned out really good. The lettering, I'll be honest, is what took me so long. I used such a fine brush to do it. If you aren't steady with your hands, you can always use decoupage. You can also use gold pens like gold Sharpies or gold felt markers as a way of doing it, so you're not constantly using a tiny paintbrush, because that took me forever. But I've ended up with a really nicely sized scrying mirror, and because it is a picture frame, you can have it standing in front of you, which is really useful if you don't want to hold on to it. If when you're entering into trance states, you often find that you drop things, which is something you really don't want to do when you've got an obsidian scrying mirror. I got this one a little bit cheaper than maybe I should have, because it has just at the very top here, you can see my setup. There is my camera. There is my audio recording software. At the very top here, it has a tiny chip out of it, which I think is the reason why it was a little bit more affordable than it should have been. But this is not the kind of thing you want to drop. And also, it's an investment piece. If you have pets, this is going to be in much more danger, and it's a lot harder to replace than something like this. If this breaks, you can get another cheap picture frame, take the glass out of it, and replace the glass. Really affordable by comparison. So this is a really good option if you are just getting started, you don't know if scrying is for you, you've never given it a go before. This might be out of your budget. This maybe won't be, and you can go so intense with this. So for me, I have the Theban around the edge. There is Mugwort underneath the glass itself, so between the glass and the backing. You can also put petitions in there, sigils, if you want to be working with any servitors, familiars, deities, spirits in your communication. You can put their sigils and their information in there so that you can connect directly with them. If you want to work with ancestors through the mirror, you can do a really similar thing. So you can create essentially a divination portal that you are working with a specific party or person through. This one is very flexible. It can be for your own subconscious, it can be through information from guides and guardians, from ancestors, servitors, familiars, etc. But you can specify if that's what you feel comfortable with. If you feel particularly nervous about unwanted things coming forwards, you can put protections on the frame itself as well as on the back so that you are able to add additional protection to your divination. It makes it a really accessible way of creating a tool that a lot of people feel they are never going to have access to. So I thoroughly enjoyed myself while making this. I really hope that you did enjoy it, and also let me know if you have made one yourself. How did you do it? Did you use different steps? What did you use? Let me know, because they are so much fun to make. Honestly, this was more stressful than it should have been, mostly because of the paint fiasco. If you follow me on Instagram, you know my panic with that. And yeah, really enjoyed it, and it's a really useful magical tool that I can use from this point onwards. So with that being said, I hope that you did enjoy this video. It was a little bit different for me than what I would usually do, but if you enjoy this arts and crafts or witchy arts and crafts videos, let me know the kind of things that you'd like to see me create so that I can do the trial and error and I can tell you how I do it if that's something that you want to learn about in the future. So if that's something you want to see, let me know. If you like this content or you like my channel, feel free to like the video and subscribe. I try to post magical content every single week. I've been a little bit behind over the last what feels like a few months, but I'm trying to catch up with myself now to get things back on track. And if you do want to support me further, then I do have a Patreon where I post additional monthly content on there. I will leave that linked in the description box, and the names of some of my patrons will be on the end screen in just a moment. With that being said, I would love to know what your favourite kind of divination is, and if you get to the end of this video, please leave a whole bunch of hearts, and I will try to heart as many of them as I can. So with that being said, I hope you're all staying safe. I hope you have a marvellous magical day. I hope you have success with your divination and your scrying, and I will see you in the next video. Bye!